Welcome everyone. Super happy to be on Let's Talk AI today. I am with Paul Iusztin. Paul, how are you doing?
I am great. How are you?
I'm very good. It's Monday, and like a Monday, everything there's Monday, everything goes well, and others everything goes bad. For me, I think everything is going well, and I think for you too, right?
Yeah, as I said, I solved many bugs in this morning, so I'm done for this week.
That's awesome. So maybe for the people who might not know you yet, could you introduce yourself in a few sentences?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Paul Iusztin. I am a machine learning engineer. I have almost 5 years in this domain. I also worked as a software engineer. Actually, my journey began as a software engineer, but after 1 year and a half, this AI come out to me, and I know naturally drawn to it. And with my first opportunity, I jumped into a deep learning research position, and yeah, that's basically what got me into this point.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I really like the fact that you started as a software engineer. As I was discussing with Adi Polak, who's writing the O'Reilly book about Spark and how to scale with Spark, we were discussing about the great qualities software engineers had while designing machine learning systems and how it was very uh, like you get very good practices from being a software engineer into these kind of things. But I'll ask you more things about it.
Yeah,
Paul, can you
and
share? Yes.
I wanted to say that I think that for machine learning engineers now is the time to shine, because until this point I think there was a lot of focus on research because
Hmm.
algorithms were still at the beginning, so it was natural to insist on research. But now the algorithm matured in many domains, and yeah, it's time to engineer and build stuff.
Exactly. And this is super exciting. I'm going to ask you more things about what have you built and how would you go about it and more things like that. But I was about to ask you, what are you trying to achieve in the field today?
Well, my current goal is actually, I just deeply thought about this like a few months ago, and I had this clarity that my grand focus is to shift from MLOps on structured data on MLOps on unstructured data, more exactly on generative AI algorithm. Because I just started working at a generative AI company called Metaphysics, so I thought, hey, I want to do MLOps on unstructured data. I work at a company that does uh, generative AI, and it's only natural to move onto this path because at some point I was the guy that wanted to know everything,
Okay.
but that got me like into freezing point, and it made me like not enjoy doing things anymore because I will always think, oh my god, I need to know so much, and I couldn't enjoy myself. So I reverse that, and I'm trying to focus and find my niche and basically be the best at that niche. And like this, you can still learn because there's still a lot to learn. You can still provide value at that point, because if you know a lot of stuff, you can talk about a lot of stuff, but you can't build robust systems with a lot of experience. And that's one key thing that I just realized soon.
That's super interesting insights. Um, I will ask you more about this for sure. Like, how do you find your one thing? I feel like you find the very like. I think that there isn't a more sexiest like job on the field right now with like the explosion of LLMs plus MLOps. I feel like those are like the two big things right now, and you're just combining both and going for it.
Yeah, actually, I'm not by generative AI. I'm not that much into LLMs. That in the computer vision part of generative AI, like GANs, Stable Diffusion, and this part of things. But I'm also interested into LLMs, but it's not like my number one priority. But it
I
is
see.
cool to at least know how to use them and how to integrate them, at least as a user. I think they can boost up a lot of your productivity. Like, I know this is something that you hear everywhere, but I believe that if you know to use tools like the OpenAI API or other open source LLMs like Falcon and LangChain and stuff like this, you can bring a lot of productivity into your daily life, actually.
Agreed. And I'll ask you more about like building great systems that enhance all those open source models. Love the. We can discuss also about open source. So you've mentioned a little bit your career. Can you do a short retrospective of from the university to now what you've been doing and a bit of the key lessons on each point?
Yeah, sure. So actually, when I joined university, I didn't know any programming or math and so on. During the high school, I wasn't so much into, let's say, science. Then I was more like a classic adolescent, let's say, enjoying life. But when I kicked it into university, during the first year, I joined a hackathon, and there we wanted to build a mobile app, but we had no clue how to do that. Of course, we didn't manage to build anything useful, but during that process, something light up into me, and I don't know, it just clicked. Something just clicked, and I knew what I want to do. Because during the university, everything was very theoretical, and maybe for some people that work. I wanted to get good grades and so on, to keep the scholarship and so on. But it wasn't like, I don't know, the thing that make you happy in the morning and you want to wake up and build something, do something. And that was actually building, at the moment, building a web application, mobile application, building software in general. And at the end of the second year, I actually got a job into the field as a backend engineer in Python. At the back of my mind, I knew that I wanted to move into AI, but there were no machine learning positions in my hometown, and the remote work was zero at the time, and I didn't know anything about contracting and so on. I was just a
Mm.
stupid student, so didn't had this bigger vision, let's say. So yeah, I picked a Python job because I knew, hey, I heard that you do Python in machine learning, and at least I can learn Python. So I started working as a backend engineer in Python at a small company in my hometown. We were like a few people, so pretty fast. I had to work on a couple of microservices. I also had to work on a React Native application on their like logic side of things. On UI, I suck. I don't know. You don't want UI built by me, but yeah. And at some point, with a few of my friends, we actually started building a startup because I said, hey, I want to build stuff. So I want to build stuff for me and to continue doing that. And hey, let's start doing something. So we actually built a Uber for handyman. Here in Romania, we have a huge problem with handyman. They're not reliable. It's very hard to find them. You don't know if they're good or bad. It's a big problem. It still is a big problem. And we said, hey, we can basically create a portfolio system for them and centralize all the handymen in Romania. So we built an MVP. We actually went to startup incubators, to a startup incubator called Innovation Labs, and we passed the first stages and so on. But at some point, we hit the wall of marketing and sales and stuff like that, and we were only engineers and we were all students, and nobody wanted to go that path. So yeah, it naturally failed because nobody wanted to do that, and we realized that, hey, you can't do anything without selling. So yeah, so we stopped, And after this experience, I changed jobs and started my machine learning job. Basically, it was at Continental as a deep learning researcher. I started directly with deep learning models in 3D object detection, 3D tracking, and all that stuff. I will be honest. At the beginning, it seemed very overwhelming. Like, I read that papers and I didn't understand nothing. But with time, after a few months, things started to uh, to get more clearer and clearer. And at some point, yeah, you get it. The teacher that was supervising us told us that you need to read the paper like you understand what is there, even if you have no clue. If you don't understand it, just go over it again and again and again, and so on, if it's a paper that you really need to understand for that use case. So yeah, I stayed 1 year and a half at that research position. It was very based on reading papers, replicating algorithm, getting better results, like the classic research job. And to be honest, I was very reminiscent about my software position because I like to write code to build stuff, not so much about this experimentation process, which is more the science way of doing. And things weren't very clear in my head. Well, like, what are the positions in the domain? Because the positions in the domain are a mess. Now, in the latest period, they started to converge, but like 3 years ago, they were a mess. Everybody was something, but no role was actually reflecting what they're doing. And yeah, it was a mess in my head. And hopefully, uh, out of luck, I stumbled into a more engineering position at Everseen. It's an Irish company, and there I still in the computer vision field, building deep learning models for 2D object detection, segmentation, tracking, like the same stack, but the perspective was different. We had to take current research, not to do our research itself, just take it, train the models on the proprietary data of the company, focus on creating the training pipeline, focusing on deploying the system, on optimizing it, basically the engineering side of things of deep learning. And then something will get clicked. Hey, I said, this is what I want to do. And only after a while, actually, when I started to spend more time on LinkedIn, I saw that there's a huge difference between this machine learning researcher position and this machine learning engineer position. So yeah, I think that spending time and socializing on a LinkedIn or any other platform of your choice on this domain, it really helps you get a broader vision of what's going on. And yeah, unfortunately, at this company, I stayed only 6 months because then it hit me that I want to be a contractor. It just sounded cool. I will be straightforward here in Romania. If you work as a business in business to business fashion, is more beneficial for you, let's say. And it just made a lot of sense to start working like this. So at the company at Everseen, they didn't want to collaborate like this. Usually, uh, corporates the corporate world doesn't want to collaborate in business to business fashion. They want full employee or nothing. So I quit and I moved into a small startup called Core AI, where at the time there were like 6 people as a contractor. And yeah, I started working there. There I did more classic machine learning, but I had a lot of time to focus on MLOps. Like a lot of time. Basically, my main focus was more MLOps and how to build the system around the models. I think I didn't train almost any models, like simple light JBM and XGBoost models, just to see that it works. But I didn't actually did experiments. But I had the time to focus a lot on data versioning, experiment tracking, model registries, model monitoring, and how to build this whole ecosystem. We actually they wanted to build a product, an MLOps product that they can later sell as a service. Not like I know weights and biases, but like they were a service company. So when they provide the machine learning service, they say, hey, along the model and whatever we do for you, we'll also provide you this platform where you can visualize everything what we're doing. But and we actually leverage like tools that already exist. We didn't build them ourselves, but we had to understand them very well to know how to integrate them into a single system. And I stayed there for almost again 2 years. But at some point, I was bored of classic machine learning, and I wanted to go back to deep learning. And but I wanted to take all this knowledge of MLOps because I saw that at at least when I worked, they lack this perspective of strong data versioning, strong model registries. They have some, but they don't use it as hardcore as classic machine learning people. To be honest, I don't know why. I don't understand why, but it just is. Maybe because the deep learning models take a lot of time to train, days, weeks, months, and it's harder to have build these reactive systems that MLOps wants basically. And yeah, and this is basically the stage that I'm working on at Metaphysics. I just joined this company two months ago, and it's still an ongoing process.
That's awesome. That's a very interesting way of navigating from the different fields and being able to find what you're really interested in working on. And very interesting how in each phase you discovered new things that you felt more appealed to work on, uh, and develop your expertise to arrive to a combination of MLOps and generative AI, which is not only LLMs, like you said, but more on the images side. That's right. And
Yeah, I
videos.
think
Is it?
yeah, I think it helps a lot because you can understand the process from the beginning until the end.
Yes.
It's easy for you to understand the whole process. And now that I'm also doing content on LinkedIn and so on, it also started to understand better the how business people see this, and
Hmm.
it started helping me also to integrate basically after the product what's going on and what's the end goal of things.
Hmm. That's very interesting. I'm going to ask you about your LinkedIn journey more ahead. And I totally agree with you in the way that a data scientist is great, but it lacks of understanding of the pipelines, like the data engineer part or the software engineer part. And a data engineer might want to develop certain skills of BI and ML, even basic ones. And I agree that it gives a really strong competitive advantage when you're able to build full solutions on your own and understand the process, even though you're not the best at it. But like you could do it. Maybe you'll take more time on specific parts, which are not your specialty. But having the full picture can allow to capture better the overall value of it, and having this business perspective after the BI, after the data is consumed, plus each step of the chain, I feel is very valuable, which is why I agree with you in a way that it is very recommended to be curious about, yeah, but what those data engineers are doing there and why, and how and what do they take into account, and why is my data like that, and if something's wrong with the data, not trying directly to fix it, but also understanding it in other parts and why it comes like this. I just wanted to mention this based on what you mentioned.
Yeah,
um
totally agree. But maybe in bigger companies, it's a little bit more overwhelming. I had the luck to work like on projects on smaller scales,
mhm.
so it was quite easy for me to take half an hour a day, and just read things by myself and diving into other people code and reading and trying to force me to understand this thing. But I know maybe if you work at a more corporate environment with huge teams, is more, I don't know, intimidating to go into
Yeah.
a data engineering pipeline with 100 microservices.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. I feel like there is something there that is, you mentioned reading, and I feel like there is so many documentation out there that explains things super well in videos that you can just try to very quickly build a proof of concept of what you understand, right? You understood from what you have been reading, and like build a very quick free account and deploy something and play around with it. And like you mentioned, like you since the beginning you wanted to build things, and that you got bored in the very theoretical part of things. And I relate to this because it is very challenging to for me to just learn the theory without the real value of it, which is why now every time I go about learning something new, of course at the very beginning you need a knowledge base of what's there, and you need to understand the concepts, which is why you can like watch a lot of YouTube videos or
Yeah,
go to classes, and there are a lot of free content out there. But uh, at some point you can really jump into practice and like try to build things, break them, and try again. And we mentioned it a lot in this podcast, but I feel like this is the best way for one to get used to concepts, because now it's not just theory that you're trying to put in your mind, you just relate concepts to something that you're building. And I
yeah,
feel like there is no better way to understand things than
yeah.
approaching it like that and trying things out.
Yeah, plus that when you're building things, your mind shifts from a passive point of view to an active point of view, because you actually have to, you're there with your keyboard and you have to write stuff. So you have to focus. Your brain has to work a lot harder.
Yeah.
But I believe that this process is more, at least this is how it works for me. Maybe for some is different, but it's more as an iterative process. So usually I take a topic, I learn about it, and then I try to build something. Depending on the depth of the topic, on how much time I have, and other priorities in my life, that depends how much time I spend on, I don't know, doing a mini project, writing an article or something there. And then if I still need to, and it's something important to me, I go back to the theory, and then I go more in depth, and then I build something more, I don't know, more harder, and so on. So it's a cyclical process, in my opinion, an iterative process, how people like to call it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And it is and based on the necessity also, like if this is something I need to deliver to a client, then of course I'll be able to put way more time into it. And so I'm going to learn deeper the concepts and the parameters, and what I need to consider
Yeah,
into this overall problem. This is very interesting in like how to capture value, how to learn, how to iterate, how to move fast, how to grow skills and abilities fast in a very fast growing environment.
yeah.
um,
But
and
I will say something that probably all everybody knows, but it still uh, amazes me that use ChatGPT. I mean, it's just amazing.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
it to give you. It doesn't solve all problems, but it gives you a first impression of how to do stuff.
Hmm.
Pretty good. Like, I know I had to build an infrastructure for something. I have no clue how to do it, or some clue. I explained the problem to ChatGPT, and it gave me like 75 of the solution. Afterwards, I just took what he said and started diving in more into the problem and connected the rest of the dots, and that was it.
Mm, exactly. And this is because I think that the main challenge here is like what to ask. And I feel like this is a very big problem for a lot of people. They don't really know like the good questions to make to chat gpt. And like you mentioned, if you have this problem, just briefly explain the overall problem and like ask for a roadmap of how to approach this. Like, okay, I need to do this, how would you go about it, taking into account x y z. And then it just builds a roadmap, and then each topic you take it individually and you can iterate in ChatGPT, or you can go on Google, or you can watch a video on YouTube. But now you know what you're looking for, and
Yeah.
and you can iterate on the first questions. Okay, but what do I take into account? What are the challenges about these tasks? And like, you get so much information that you just build your roadmap to your learning path to what you want to do. And this is
Yes.
super, super, from my point of view, not enough people are using it that way.
Yeah, and the beautiful part is that you could do this by your own, like Googling in the old fashioned, but it might take you days, weeks, because you have to read a lot. And yeah, it doesn't
Yeah,
replace you, it just speed up this, I don't know, discovering process.
exactly. So we've drifted a bit from different, very interesting topics, and I'm super happy that we can share and capture this value together. I wanted to ask you about MLOps. Um, so, so maybe I feel like we talk a lot about MLOps, but we don't come back that often on like MLOps frameworks, full stack MLOps. Maybe you could give briefly how you see MLOps today, and how it combines your skills, and maybe a brief example of. I know you've wrote. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you've wrote a framework. You've wrote um, uh, an online book or a short.
It's more of a course. It has the code on GitHub, and based on the code, I wrote the step-by-step explanations on Medium. And
Hmm,
there are 8 articles on Medium that basically follow the content of the code and how I thought to build architecture and everything that's in there. Because
that's
it's for someone new, it's hard to just looking at the code. It's hard
yeah.
to understand the whole picture.
Yeah. So maybe what we can do is you could explain briefly the MLOps, how you view it, a quick example of an MLOps, and then maybe explaining how your course goes about like what you've done and the code. And
Yeah,
I think
sure.
that would be super interesting.
So I think that there are 2 branches of MLOps. I don't want to get too caught into terminology because, frankly, I still think that is this is still developing. But it's like the MLOps platform guy and the MLOps machine learning engineer. The MLOps platform guy is more like a DevOps that is building the actually is deploying the infrastructure, is taking care of the infrastructure, is creating the virtual machines and so on. Basically, more of the DevOps side of things, and then is the machine learning operations, more related to the machine learning guy. And I think that in this setup is more like a mindset than a what you have to do, because when you build a system like a machine learning system, you have to take into consideration a lot of things. Like until now, when you built a classic software, you had Git. Like everybody uses Git, and then it's very easy because the process is very standardized. You know that everyone uses Git. You use Git because you have to. You have no choice. And basically, what does Git do? It version is your code, so you can very easily share code. You can very easily version, go back, roll back to different versions of code, have different branches where various people can work, have multiple environments, and so on. So basically, what machine learning operations is, you want this stuff in your machine learning system, and but the issue is that in a machine learning system, you depend a lot on the data. You have multiple data sources. The data source is not static, it's continually incoming from different vertices. So you have a moving data set in a production environment, not like in research where you download the data set and boom, you're done. Uh, you have multiple configuration files that you use to train your models, where you have your and more or less your hyperparameters, right? You also have your code. Maybe you have multiple artifacts and so on. The idea is that you have a lot of more moving pieces that are moving around, and you have to track them and know about them, because there's this thing of data governance and explainability and so on, where you have your model, and you have to explain why does this model work as it works. More or less, people think when I will ask them this, more or less, the people will respond me, okay, it has 90% accuracy, but that's not actually the question that I ask. The question is with what data it has been trained. Is the data, I don't know, free of use? Does it contain any sensible information like this ethical stuff, this bias stuff? Where it was trained and so on? Does those weights can be used in specific scenarios? So basically it can respond to all these questions. And also you can very easily say, okay, I use data version, I know, 3.1. I use configuration version 2. I use code version 2.0. So when you want to replicate an experiment, is extremely easy. Basically, you have everything in one place, and it's there. You know what is going on. I think this is one side of machine learning operations, and the other side is like this again, this DevOps side of things, where you want a reactive system. Basically, when uh, you have new data. When you have new data, automatically the model will train itself. After the model train itself, it generates an artifact in the model registry, which will automatically trigger the deploying, let's say the testing pipeline, then the deployment pipeline, and this stuff. And I think because there are so many things attached to MLOps, that's why maybe it sounds scary and confusing, because from what I saw, everybody understands something different when they talk about MLOps. It's just,
Hmm.
as you said, this sexy word that people throw around.
Yeah, no, but I think you've combined it, you've explained it in a great way, and that's very interesting. And so to come back to your Medium articles and the code, I'll ask you that first, and then maybe like the business value behind it. But could you share briefly what do you capture in your 8 articles with the code that you've provided on Git?
Yeah, sure. My pleasure. So, in my perspective, it captures like a pretty standard uh, architecture for every machine learning system. Like maybe it's in other system it will vary. Some components will vary, but you can generalize everything after all. And it uses the tree pipeline design, where you have a training pipeline. Actually, you have the feature engineering pipeline, you have the training pipeline, and you have the inference pipeline. In my case, I use the batch prediction system. So this is the batch prediction pipeline, but this inference pipeline can actually be swapped with anything like request response system or a stream deployment, because I will explain just a little bit later. So you have these three pipelines, right? And now you have to connect them somehow. The feature engineering pipeline is connected with the training pipeline through the feature store, which a feature store is just a smart database for machine learning systems. Let's say it helps you to version your data, as I said, very easily. It helps you to create virtual data sets over your data. Let's say that you have three different tables. It lets you very easily combine uh, various features between them into a virtual a view that you can later train your model on. So it's basically a database specialized for machine learning, and that's it. So yeah, basically you have the feature engineering pipeline, which continuously gather data, in this case from an API, which gives the energy consumption from Denmark. They were actually the only country in Europe or from the world that exposes their country energy consumption levels open on the internet, which was pretty cool if you ask me, like on the whole country. And yeah, I gather continually that data. I processed it into different features. I validated it with great expectations. And after the data is validated and cleaned, I put it into the feature store. Then the training pipeline is triggered, which basically trains the model and generates an artifact, basically, which are the weights of the trained model. which I put into the model registry. So now we have basically the model. In my case, I took this model and passed it through the batch prediction pipeline, which means I just load the model, I just load the data, and I do the inference, and I put the predictions into a database. In my case, I used a GCS bucket, but like if you really want to go by the book, you should use a Redis database because it's a lot faster and low latency use. But I wanted to keep like things simple, and a bucket is more easy to use and is free of use for, I don't know, 2 megabytes of data of how much is here. So, but the idea is that you take the predictions, you put them in a bucket, and then you have various applications that consume those predictions. In my case, it was a simple dashboard, but you can go wild from there and build any applications based on those predictions. And the predictions were the forecast of energy consumption values for the next 24 hours, because the energy levels are a time series. So naturally, you want to predict the values in the future. So now you have all this system, and but it's still not automated, right? So and you have many moving components that they're not glued together and not automated, and that's where Airflow kicks in, which lets you build a DAG, direct acyclic graph, which basically just glues all the component into a single, let's say, script, if it's easier to digest, but it's a DAG. A DAG is basically just a set of tasks that are executed, and afterwards it lets you very easily schedule, orchestrate these tasks. In my case, I ran them hourly because I wanted to predict the values every hour. So it made sense to run this whole system every hour. But it gives you a lot of options. You can schedule them, I don't know, daily, monthly, however you want, or you can put a listener on other events when they happen. And I don't know, you can go wild and do whatever you want. And yeah, and afterwards, what's still missing here? You don't have eyes into the system, and that's why I built a monitoring component. In this course, it was pretty easy more to show the need of a monitoring component, and because we are using time series with a delay of 1 hour, it makes sense to compute the error, the actual error, like in real time, because kind of you have the ground truth in real time, but in many systems you don't. So I highlighted that when you don't have the ground truth in real time or soon enough, that's when you need to use drifts or other fancier methods. So there are these two use cases. And yeah, so now we have the whole system, and the last step is actually to deploy it. I deployed it to GCP and to build a CI/CD pipeline that basically takes the system, builds it, tests it, but I didn't write any test in the course, but theoretically that will be the next step. This is the CI part, and the CD part is to take this tested build and deploy it to the cloud. And yeah, this is the an overview of the course.
That's awesome. Thanks a lot for sharing. It have a lot of values, and I really like how you put each piece in context. I felt like it was very clear. If I understand correctly, you switched the inference pipeline when you talked about the three main pipelines. You switched the inference, which would be for streams or like real time, to a batch one, and then you continue because you just needed to do a batch, right?
Yeah, actually that's what I wanted to continue and I forgot, because after the training pipeline, you have the model artifact, and actually at this point the system is decoupled because you have the inference, the feature engineering pipeline, a training pipeline that generates you the artifact. And at this point, with the model artifact, you can do whatever you want. So you can take that model artifact and put it, as you said, in a request response web application, into a stream application, into a batch system. It's decoupled. It's like a file that you later on download and put in another application. and that's it. What I want to highlight is that just this terminology is so fancy and scary when there you actually, when it drills down to the fundamentals, is not that complicated. Like a model registry and artifact is just a file put in a storage system, which is version, and that's it. It's like a bucket that people use for 10 years.
So that's super interesting, and I totally agree with you. Those are a lot of like words that can scare and like sounds very complex, but still very useful words because they speak about different things and concepts that are very important. But like you said, they're important, but they're not complicated necessary if you put them in the right place in the big picture.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why it's great to have good methods to understand those concepts, because when you read them it will be hard at first to have a great idea, but once you start implementing them and seeing where they fit, then it's way easier to, oh, it's just that, like you said, it's just oh, it's just this thing on my screen that I'm talking about, or
Yeah.
it's just this option that I want to give. You mentioned also different tools, that was very interesting. And so I recommend everyone to check your 8 articles on Medium.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
please, it will be my honor.
And if they have any questions, they can also come to you. We'll talk about that later. But
Yeah, you can point them to my LinkedIn, and I will respond to them with pleasure.
exactly, I like always. I share all the socials in the description. So if you're looking for the links, and I'll put also the links of your Medium articles and everything we mentioned in the podcast in the description. Now, from a business perspective, like I said before, I wanted to ask you about how how come, I mean, MLOps, like we said, it's very large. It means a lot of things, and it have a lot of integrations. But that being said, would you have some examples about uh, business cases where MLOps really add value, and or like an example of an MLOps system that is integrated in a business case, like some examples like that?
Well, I can actually start with a very recent discussion. We have this discussion with those large language models that we don't know what they have been trained on, right?
Hmm.
So if you have built from the beginning a very robust MLOps system that tracks every piece of data that comes into the model and it is trained on and so on, you can point very clearly to every piece of data, right? And actually, MLOps still points to this. In my perspective, it also includes this cleaning process and understanding of your data and slicing of the data and so on. So, uh, if you have looked, even companies like Google and OpenAI haven't uh, did this enough, because there is a table on this European Union committee. I don't know the exact name, but they're starting to regulate these systems, and they created a set of rules if and put all these large language models and stable diffusion and so on into them, and almost nobody had all the criteria buffered, like data governance, model explainability, and so on. So I think that now with this large big system is critical to understand what to train your model on and so on. This is more like, let's say, the explainability, fairness type of things. But another scenario is that, let's say that you have a model in production, everything is working great, you train it, you put it, it's great. A month passes by, and you made some updates, and you put another model in production. This is still okay. Another month passes by, and you change the model. Now this model breaks everything, and now you want to revert to the previous model, but you don't know how to revert, because you have lost your configurations, because some data scientist trained his model on his personal PC, and that configuration file somehow got lost, deleted, or whatever. The data set got corrupted in these 2 months because someone put another I don't know 10,000 files of I don't know bad data into that data set and so on. And now you had 1 month ago a good model that provided a lot of value, and now everything is gone. You've lost months of work because you don't know what happened. And this sounds like if you know what the issue is, it's just a click of a button and everything is back again, because they're actually just maybe some hyperparameters or some files that you need to change. It's not complicated, but it's like you need to search a lot, and it's not easy because you don't know where to start. And I
Hmm.
think this control that it gives you, it's the most value that it gives, such a system gives you,
Hmm. Yeah,
in my perspective.
that's super interesting. And for example, if we take your Medium articles with like what your the prediction is the prediction of the energy, right?
Yeah.
So maybe this prediction of the energy is used by someone who is trading with it, for example, and on whatever is a trading tool for energy in Denmark. But maybe this is a model combined with another one, and this person is using your model with many other sources to like predict things. And maybe when like 1 month you do an update, and now somehow it's not working and his strategy is not working anymore. And so having this tool can really, like, we can really put into context how MLOps can be a key player in here. um and
Yeah,
so
that's a great example. For example, let's say that you expose the model what that you're letting people to use through a version, right? A simple version. And the user would easily see that, okay, this guy upgraded his model version. And yeah, that's done. You found the issue.
hmm, that's awesome. And with MLOps, can we deploy, for example, if I build another version that have some tweaks of hand to my end users? And for example, let's give this example where they are trading with this information. It's the first thing that came into my mind because we were talking about energies. But you want to deploy like a new model that is similar to the first one but have some more tricks into it in terms of feature engineering, and also in terms of you used some other data into the model, but it is quite similar to the first one. And on the paper, like, you have a great score with it, you have a better score than the other one, but in the reality your users have been using for months uh, the version 1 of this model. So maybe, let's say you're releasing your data in a specific endpoint and people can access it with I don't know, an account, or I don't know, let's say they have a subscription. So MLOps could allow you to deploy both system into production and being able to choose which versions you want so that you can implement one or the other in your whatever tool that you build to trade, correct?
Yeah, sure. MLOps, and I think here also software engineering kicks in a lot, because you can either like do a system of production testing if that's what you wish, like a shadow deployment or A/B testing or whatever, or you can be open about it and say, hey, I know in a URL that you access your data with, hey, this is slash v1, hey, this is slash v2, and you're open about it and say, hey, we hope that v2 is better, but we still give you the old one in case it doesn't work.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think this is a very good thing to do, especially with these models
Hmm.
nowadays.
And that's awesome because you can really, I mean, if you want to, you can really explain like what's the difference between the models, what you took into considerations, what were the inputs, and like the the like data governance part of MLOps really comes very handy here because based on what your the use case, like based on how you implement the model for whatever you want to do, then it makes a lot of sense to know what happened with this model and why is this version different from the first one. And this is something you get from machine learning operations. That's very interesting. Thanks a
Yeah,
lot
exactly.
for sharing. This is great. I feel like you made it. You've made MLOps fun and easy to understand.
That's
uh,
my goal. Uh,
so
Richard Feynman has this saying that if you can't explain something to a 7 years old, it means that you don't understand it.
yeah, and I feel like sometimes when you just try to teach people something that you think you understand, you might be challenged in terms of how you thought you were understanding it compared to how you really understand it, and you
Yeah,
might need to dive deep into it again so that you can explain it clearly, because I feel when you truly understand something or a concept, you can very explain it in easy words so that people have the best path to not know what you're like, understand you, not understand the full concept and fundamentals because they need to do their research, but understand you clearly when you explain it.
yeah, totally.
So, so maybe I would like to ask you about now your LinkedIn journey. You've been posting on LinkedIn for some time. Can you share about the great things that you get from sharing on LinkedIn, and why do you share on LinkedIn, and what do you share about?
Yeah, sure. So I started talking on LinkedIn, I know, like 8, 9 months ago, and I love to learn. I'll learn. I have this thing that I have to learn something daily. Maybe in a more agglomerated, more when I don't have time, maybe I have time at least 5 minutes to dive into a topic. And if I have a more free day, I have I know 1 hour, 2 hours. The idea is that I want to learn something daily, and I did this like for in the latest 5, 6 years. But I realized that I'm not a guy that I know has its way around words and so on. So basically, when I went to I don't know interviews or I wanted to tell people what I do, uh, I realized that all that work was lost. Not completely lost. Like it helped me a lot in my daily work, but I didn't know how to sell it, how to sell that work because at the end of the day, if I still spend the time, I want to get the most out of it, right? So I
Mhm.
said, hey, if I still learn all this stuff, let's start. I want to start talking about and put it on the internet. Like, why not? And that's how I started. And basically, I just took what I was interested in and what I was already researching and reading about, and I just took it and summarized it and put it on LinkedIn, on Medium, and so on. And yeah, that's actually still what I do right now. I In the latest 8 months, I refined my process, like how I talk about what I learn and what I do, like to be I know more uh to more easily read it, to be better put it into page and stuff like that, like to have prettier graphs and so on. But that's still what I do. I don't like I know that the real business mentality is follow your customer and do what your customer asks you to. And if you want to build like a true business, that's totally true. But that's not my end goal, at least at this point. So I actually reversed that completely, and I just talk about what I want to talk and what is interesting for me at the moment, because this content creation stuff is actually just a byproduct of what I do. Is not like uh, I know what I do is about byproduct of this LinkedIn journey.
Hmm. Oh, that's very interesting. And I would add also that when dealing with customers, we need to do what they want, but I feel like being able to educate customers and explaining why the idea that, like, why does the need that you're talking about is the end goal, but like without getting too much into detail, explain why it's complicated, or why it might not be the best way to go about, or why it's not the priority. because customers don't have the visibility on what's going on behind and what do they really have. I mean, they could, because there are a lot of type of customers, which is why I think it's very interesting to be able to communicate the same. I like how Wired does this, or maybe I'm mistaken in, but like how to explain like one thing in different levels, like to a 7-year old or to an expert, and being able to like
Yeah,
switch your entire vocabulary and ideas and concepts based on who you're talking to is a very, very great skills, because then you can share like the problems we might face ahead. You can share them in different manners so that you build a better solution. The customer is happy because he have what he wants, but he understood why we didn't go a specific way but another path. And of course he have the final word and he leads, but I feel like customer are also more grateful when you explain them why a specific pass might not be the best option now, but there is this alternative that combine what he wants plus more things. And I feel like this is what uh end customer really wants. It's like, okay, I thought I wanted that, but this is what I wanted plus better things. It's just on a different path without getting too much into the technical
yeah,
detail.
totally. Because I believe, especially in software engineering, is very easy to say that I don't know. I want a spaceship and say it's easy when you imagine the final product, but you don't understand the work behind it and all the trade offs and all the costs and all these things. And it's even me as an engineer sometimes I don't understand all these steps, like especially when I have to estimate stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
many
it's
people,
hard.
it's very hard
It's hard.
to touch all the I don't know, moving pieces.
Yeah.
Maybe I know you stumble upon a bug that will take you 1 week. I just saying it's something very complicated, something very you just can't predict this stuff.
Hmm. I agree. I agree. Which is why like going for like analysis and maybe some proof of concept sometimes can be helpful, but it cannot do all of it. This is the same thing when like you present a Power BI in the end. If you haven't introduced what goes behind the Power BI, then for the customer maybe you've just built cool graphs. But
Yeah,
let's say you have like different models and you have like different very complex KPI, so you had to put different databases together and you have to do like a lot of this kind of work behind so that you can really consume in a very easy way the data and take better decisions. If the customer just see the Power BI, he will not see like what went into building this and the quality, and like you mentioned about like data governance and
yeah,
like what's behind my model.
yeah.
So
Oh no,
yes,
continue.
I was almost done. I think I wanted to add that being able to explain that there is a lot of things behind without like going very into detail of, all right, so we've built this architecture, we've done that, we've choose these pieces to do this task, but like on an overall view, just knowing that behind what you're looking at there is an entire system and there is this and this and that. Just by doing so, I feel like it gives the customer a way like more confidence into your expertise, but also he knows that it doesn't take just to build a, I talk about Power BI, but whatever visualization tools or whatever you want to consume in an app, or but yeah, the main thing is this was my point.
Yeah, totally. He will think, hey, I can do this in Excel in 5 minutes. Why it took you 3 months?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What's going on?
Let's go. Well, let me explain to you how but also this is a very interesting thing to mention because customers like needs to know about all these things, and this is why it comes very handy to being able to explain at different levels of complexity these kind of things. And if you have a very technical customer, then he wants to know why did you make specific decisions, and then you need to be able to go about it and explain it. I mean, depend on the contract that you have, of course, I guess,
Yeah, totally.
but yeah. Um, so so I think we're. I'm looking at the time right now, and I will have many more questions. But I'm super happy with what we shared in this episode. I have three follow up questions for you. I think the first one being, um, if you have like a quick, like some short tips for people who are entering into the field, what would they be?
Hmm, good question. Let me think. I think that to take action, like, don't overthink what you're doing. Of course, you have to do, I know, a couple of courses. I know if you're doing your university, that's even better. To do a couple of projects and so on, but don't hunt your perfect portfolio, your perfect certification set, or whatever. Do something until you have something, and then start applying to jobs, start being active into the market, because this will help you a lot to understand the markets, to have a feedback, to have to create a reactive system that you can understand and adapt on it, basically like a reinforcement learning system. That's what you want. That's, even if you want to, I know, get the job, build a business, build a content creation system, anything. I think don't stay in the dark. I did that, and it actually slows your process a lot. Like, get out there when you have something to do. I know, not when you're at zero, because you need some fundamentals, but I know when you're at 25%, 30% on your journey, get out there. Most probably in the first step you will fail, but that's fine, because you will, that's how you learn, and that's how you learn what you need to learn, which is actually the most important part of this process.
That's awesome. Fail early, fail fast, iterate.
Yeah, exactly.
We could also do the analogy of what you were describing before as an MLOps, like how each model have its interpretability and its ways to track it, and you can apply it to like each interview, each thing that you've had. Like, have this, like, why, give me feedback, I want to know why, I want to improve, what was
Yeah,
I missing,
exactly.
what didn't I know. And then if you do like that each step, wow, you learn so fast.
Because if you
S-
go blindly random, you might be lucky, but most probably
mm,
your luck will run out at some point.
yeah, you might get an idea at some point of what's going wrong, but it's not worth the time you put in to like figure it out after so many times. Whether if you go for feedback, you might iterate and improve way faster. And the LinkedIn community is very helpful about that. So reach out about people on LinkedIn, which is linked to my second question. How can people reach out to you and see your work, see your articles? What are out there that you want
Well,
to share with us?
I'm the most active on LinkedIn. Actually, it's the only platform where there are big chances that I will respond to you in like not a month, because I try to minimize my social media, because I know it's very easy to get distracted if you're active on all the platforms, and for me it's very easy to distract me from my work. So basically, I'm active, like if you want to talk with me and so on, contact me on LinkedIn, but I'm also active on Medium and GitHub. So basically, if you have a question about the course, which you can also add a issue on the GitHub, or if you want to contribute on the course, you have some wacky ideas, additions, you can also create a pull request, and I'm open to add additional features to it. Why not? And yeah, and recently I started a newsletter on Substack. So if you're interested to gain more insights about what I've talked in this podcast, you can also subscribe to my weekly newsletter where I talk about the same stuff.
Awesome. All the links will be in the description. So now my last question, and I want to thank you a lot, Paul, for your time. I really enjoy sharing about all these topics with you and like putting visibility on some very interesting topic and topics that are shaping the field right now. So I had such a great time. So thanks a lot for coming and sharing on this show.
Thank you for having me here. It was great talking with you.
My last question is, what's your message for the Let's Talk AI community? It can be personal, it can be professional, it can be about building a career, it can be about MLOps, it can be about anything.
Well, I think that the most important thing in life is to follow your curiosity. Like, to have all the system in place and things is great, but if you're not passionate about what you're doing, at some point you'll get, I don't know, bored, or didn't or I don't know, tired of continuing and so on. But if you're passionate about it, you will persevere, whatever it is there in front of you. You can go on. So
That's awesome. Yep.
simple, you need a simple thing that you need to follow. So even when you're down and your mind is going crazy, if you have a simple statement, it's very easy to continue.
Hmm. I really like that. Like how you build your guidelines and how you follow them when you're in down moments. It's very interesting. Well, thanks a lot, Paul. I had such a great time, and I wish you to have a wonderful day.
I wish you a wonderful day, and yeah, I had a great time here.